You're listening to the Soulless Minions of Orthodoxy, alternative DVD commentaries. I'm Justin, and sitting with me is...
Josh. Hello.
Hello, Josh. And today we're going to be looking at the original, the classic, The Day the Earth Stood Still. If you're interested in listening to this audio commentary with the movie, as we hope you do, you'll need to set up a sync point. And that sync point for us is approximately 13 seconds into the movie. The first black frame after the 20th Century logo disappears and fades to black. So we're going to do a quick test here. I'm going to show you how it's done. I'm going to go 3, 2, 1, unpause, and we'll unpause together and watch the movie. Of course, you can listen to us without watching the movie, but we think we'll have more fun with you if you watch it at the same time. So in either case, we're going to launch into the movie. Get your remotes ready and handy. And here we go. 3, 2, 1, unpause.
All right, Justin, what are we bringing to this commentary today?
Oh, boy. Well, speaking for myself, I'm a longtime fan of this movie. I just absolutely love it. It is, I've said this before in other podcasts that we've done, I believe this is hands down, in my opinion, the best science fiction movie ever made.
And there are a lot of diehard Day the Earth Stood Still fans out there.
I mean, I'm a fan of the movie in general, but I think this is the finest example of science fiction on film.
Well, you're not the only one who feels that way, because in 1995, the National Film Registry selected this film for preservation because it was deemed culturally, historically, and or aesthetically significant.
Aesthetically significant? Okay, interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I don't disagree with their choice. I think the movie is fantastic. Bernard Herrmann did the score for this movie. Excellent score. Very
You're taking away some of my notes here.
Well, sorry.
Yeah, I was about to mention Bernard Herrmann.
He is, of course, a classic film score composer.
It is a very unique score, I would say.
He did the score to Psycho.
Oh, really?
I don't know if you knew that.
No, I didn't.
He's a very well-known. He's one of the composers that John Williams would look up to when he would look at film composers. I mean, this guy's he was the John Williams of his time.
Directed by Robert Wise. It's a little title card cue point, so just to make sure you're still in sync with us.
And
title sequence just ended.
Robert Wise, of course, also an equally well-known film director, among other films, did Star Trek 1.
Star Trek the Motion Picture.
That's right.
That's right. What else has he done? I'm not quite familiar with his resume.
Of course, I'm going to draw a blank on anything, but a number of films you have seen. I wish I could remember them. I wish I wrote them down. But many other classics. Just well-known, well-respected, and rightfully so. Now, this I like. This is the kind of thing they did in older movies. We are 2 minutes and 36 seconds into the movie, and this is like Star Wars. You are into the action already. We're not spending any extra time, as we'll get into. We'll talk about the remake. We're not getting into anything having to do with the secondary characters of the movie, the mom, the boy, the boyfriend, all those people. We're getting right into the plot, which is the landing of the ship. And, we're just hit 3 minutes. And already, as a viewer, you're hooked. You're thinking to yourself, what's going on? This is awesome. The ship's coming. This is incredible. As opposed to character development that is not necessarily unneeded, but it's not necessary at this point because the characters haven't been introduced to what is the film's real main character, which is Klaatu. So we're following Klaatu at this point, which from an editorial point of view, I like that. Just like in Star Wars, you're thrown right into the action with the Star Destroyer coming over. Would you agree with any of that, Josh?
Well, I totally. I think this is a classic opening for a sci-fi film, and I think of when I think of a lot of sci-fi films from this era, I think of B movies, but a lot of them would try to capture this essence that this opening has. But as they are B movies, they usually fall short, and they're using stock footage with a voiceover narration. But
Right.
here we would see radio announcers in their very 50s-esque way of speaking, which is
Sure.
always a pleasant thing to hear. I find anyway. If you find that kind of thing interesting, I do. I love radio voices.
I do too. And I'm not just talking about the way a 50s movie, feels stylistically. I mean, it was just whoever edited this made the choice, or whoever wrote it probably, to start with this and just get right into the guts of the movie.
Here we go with the ship carrying Klaatu and Gort coming in. Not incredibly complicated effects by today's standards, but by 1951, it looks very good. But yeah, perfectly effective, demonstrating.
What else do you need to see?
Exactly. It doesn't have to be complicated. Well, it's a flying saucer, so that's what alien spacecraft looked like back then.
Well, that's good though. Look at that. You get the shadow coming in.
Mm-hmm.
That's given the time. That's pretty good.
Well, I did mention radio, and before I forget, in doing a little bit of research before we started this commentary, I found out that this movie was actually adapted into a radio play in 1954, and actually starred Michael Rennie. Michael Rennie reprised his role as Klaatu.
Oh, wow, I didn't know that.
An actress named Jean Peters replaced Patricia Neal. But she plays that role. It was produced by Lux Soap, and it only runs about 54 minutes. This is with commercials,
Really?
And the commercials are embedded within the radio play, because this radio play is in the public domain, so you can download it from pretty much any website you can find. I listened to the play a few days ago, and it's basically film to radio. It's basically just an abridged version of the movie. It's like listening, to the movie basically. But it was very well produced. It sounds great. I actually found the commercials in it to be, in terms of what's
nostalgic.
Nostalgia, quite humorous, interesting. They were pitching Lux Soap and how it gets you clean, and they had various stars of the era coming in and pitching their latest movies,
Right.
and as if it was still a live broadcast. And it was quite fascinating to listen to, and the audio quality was outstanding. It was very well produced. It was great. I highly recommend listening to it. And as that was based off of this film is actually based off of a short story called Farewell to the Master, which was written in 1940.
Okay.
Were you aware of that?
I knew that. As soon as I heard the title, it came back to me, yes.
Well, actually, I was quite surprised before we sat down to do this that you weren't aware that there was a radio play.
Yes, I'm very
Which I was quite
disappointed
shocked.
that
I had
didn't
no
know that.
idea. I thought, I didn't know, but I assumed that you would.
I would have told you
You being
that.
such an avid audio collector.
Right.
And I am as well, but not nearly as much as you, that you would have known, especially being such a big fan of this film,
Yeah.
that you would know that a radio play existed. And
That's a good group.
you were actually a little
up.
upset with me that I didn't mention it to you earlier, because I had found it earlier this week.
Again, I'm going to point out the editing. 8 minutes in, and we are already seeing the ship open, and quite a bit of tension has built up at this point.
Yeah, the opening is very tight, very tightly edited.
That good word. It's tight. There's nothing extraneous here, and clearly that is a real physical flying saucer. No, not flying, but saucer they built that's sitting there on site, and you just can't duplicate that as far as CG and whatnot. It's just nice to see it really there, the sun really hitting it, the actors walking off of it, that sort of thing.
I remember listening to the commentary some time ago, the commentary which has Robert Wise and Nick Meyer. Nick Meyer not having anything to do with this film. He was, he's just a fan. But I remember Robert Wise mentioning it was a kind of to-do to actually have black actors on screen. When even if they were extras, they just showed that right there, a little bit ago. That this being 1951, that was
a big deal.
That was a big deal back then. I this is one of those films that I grew up with. So of course, seeing it young and numerous times on TV or video, I had an enormous amount of respect for it, in its place, in its time and genre, and was very excited when the remake was announced. And, I was, of course, holding the remake up to maybe an almost impossible level. And I know Justin is not very fond of the remake, but I have no problems with it. It doesn't do this film justice, but I'm not opposed to it. I think it was just a missed opportunity. I think it's decent.
I think it is shit. The remake. Shit.
We don't have to be so negative.
Well, I'm just telling you straight up. I went into that movie, the remake, really, really wanting to like it. I mean, you talked about setting a perhaps too high a standard, or, the standard was set by this movie. So I don't think it is unreasonable to hold a remake to the same set of standards. This movie, looking at it from a modern day perspective, has elements to it that are very dated. But most of it, in my opinion, is almost timeless. The stuff we're seeing right now, totally timeless. Look at him. He's a scary motherfucker. And he is not CG. He is not some sort of fancy 8-legged droid or anything. He is simply a 2-armed, two-legged robot with a laser in his eye. That's it. That's all he needed to be. And he is absolutely threatening. The less he moves, the more scary he is. That is something that was lost on the filmmakers of the remake. I'll try not to be, overly mean. I mean, I'm sure they meant well. But yes, the remake just missed all of the marks, in my opinion.
Well, the remake does address this plot element right here of the ship landing openly in a baseball diamond, and that not being able to transfer so easily to modern times, and the reactions of the public. And if you've seen the remake, you'll see that the introduction of the ship in Klaatu is
very different.
Very different.
Well, I disagree with their choice in that. I believe this, depiction of the spaceship landing and coming out in full view of the public and all that. Why not? Why couldn't that have been done in a modern day, in the exact same place?
Well, it was done in view of the public.
It was at night. It felt different. This was broad daylight with a crowd. Now, as this version of the movie continues, of course, we'll see that the public is allowed to basically walk up to this same distance of the ship and look at it. From a modern day point of view, obviously that would not stand, and the government would at the very least erect a giant wall around it. You wouldn't be able to see it or get to it in any way. But that's a very easy fix to modernize. This character is basically replaced by the Kathy Bates character in the remake, and I much prefer this gentleman's version of the character.
I kind of liked Kathy Bates in the remake. I thought it was interesting that they went with a form of Condoleezza Rice, so to speak, as opposed to actually dealing with the president and or vice president, say something like the movie Independence Day would do, or the
Which
day
put
after
you in
tomorrow.
direct contact with the president.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm glad they didn't do that, but it wasn't what she represented, it's who she was as a character. This guy basically says and does the same thing that her character does. He uses different words, but they're basically saying the same thing, which is tell me the message and I'll pass it on, whatever it is you have to say. And Kathy Bates comes off as just a bitch, basically. I hate to say it, but she comes off as someone who thinks her shit smells sweet and he should really just be doing what she says. This guy, on the other hand, he doesn't agree with Klaatu's decision to keep his message to himself until he has the right people to deliver it to. But his attitude is more like an adult to a child saying, look, Klaatu, you just don't understand the politics here. Let me try and explain this to you. And, Klaatu is, of course, fully aware, and he won't stand for it. He's not going to listen to this stuff. But, this guy is a politician, and he's just trying to explain to him, why he can't do what Klaatu is asking of him. And I just prefer that take on the character. It's just a personal thing, though.
Although I didn't feel that a remake was necessary, you did comment on this film once in the past to me, mentioning that it is timeless and its message is timeless, but, it could use an updating. It couldn't damage it if it was updated to modern times. And in rewatching this movie, I had a sense that it was really a product of its time. Because when you are researching a movie for doing a commentary, you become more analytical when watching it. And I felt that being 1951, this was a product of the beginning of the Cold War and the tensions between the United States and the Soviet Union, and the fear of annihilation, through technology that was, quite frankly, advancing much faster than humans were evolving mentally. And that basically is a statement of this film, and that still holds up today. It's not quite in the same vein as this time frame. But also in rewatching the movie, I felt that what the radio play did was kind of tighten it up a little bit. The film tended to drag a little bit, I felt. Like its second act seemed a little slower than I remember. Probably because, like I said, I was being analytical.
Wouldn't the second act probably start to take over when he and Bobby start hanging out?
When he and Bobby start going out visiting, and the film tends to slow down, and also as this film was kind of from its time, the filmmaking techniques were from the time, film's pacing was different back then. It wasn't, this is a sci-fi film, but this is not a sci-fi action film. When you watch the remake, that's sci-fi action. They peppered it with action to keep the pace up.
Right.
This spaceship lands and then there is nothing but talking throughout most of this movie. And if you want to call it an action scene, there's one near the climax of the film where
but that's it.
Klaatu is chased by the army, but this film is just it's a thinking man's movie.
It is. It's almost like a philosophical sci-fi movie. It's not about the spectacle. That's why I think it's.
We had the guy with the blowtorch back there. I wonder if the makers of the Flight of the Navigator saw that and put that into their movie, because as you remember, that ship had no seams near its doors either.
Well, maybe.
They couldn't pry it open. They used the blowtorch to try to cut through, and they couldn't. So he's basically human is what they're saying. Well, he's human-like is what they're saying.
Yeah, just like he's saying that they have to have a similar atmosphere with similar pressure because he's breathing our oxygen the same way. I like this. I mean, they're not spending too much time on it, but you don't need too much time to explain that his culture is obviously far more advanced. Obviously, they have a spaceship, but it's not just that. Their medical technology is more advanced because he's actually 78 as opposed to the 38-year-old that he looks like. Little things like that.
If he were a Vulcan, he'd be about middle-aged right now.
Yeah, I guess that'd be about right. No, well, yeah.
That's why I said about.
Yeah.
I know how long they live, so.
Yeah, just this short little bit. This is something older movies did very well. They could give you a minute or two of screen time, and you've been given a lot of information. And you don't need to know the characters delivering it to get the information.
I love these older movies when they have these gentlemen in suits and a fedora. fedora hats, smoking cigarettes.
Oh,
You don't see people
So
smoking
classic.
too much on screen. And Michael Rennie, I don't know if he ever appeared in much else, but he has a very interesting look.
Yeah, I was thinking about that myself. I
Look at him
have
here in
looked
this
him
this
up.
robe. He's kind of statuesque.
Oh, he is. He's cut very well. He's got a
He has a very interesting bone structure. I think that's what makes him stand
he's
out.
got, I don't know if this word is really applicable. He's got kind of an exotic look to him
Yeah, I would say that's applicable.
that you could believe this man is not of this earth. And yeah, the way he carries himself in that very formal, dignified way. I mean, yeah, just look at him. He's incredible. He's a good-looking guy, but not.
I feel like he could have played Abraham Lincoln.
Yeah, he's got that high
Mhm.
cheekbone structure. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I did see him in something
Oh, yeah.
recently. It was. I'm sorry. What?
Well, no, I was gonna say I had looked him up
Mm-hmm.
to see what else he had been in, and he does have a number of film credits. Nothing I'm familiar with personally. I've never seen him in anything other than this movie, which lends the credence to him playing Klaatu.
Well, I saw a clip of him in something. It was unrelated to this. I can't remember from what movie it was, but it was in color. And I'd never seen Michael Rennie in anything else but black and white. So
right.
it threw me off seeing him in color. I think it was supposed to be a clip of a very bad movie, but unfortunately, but he looked different since he was in color, but still had the same face, still very, very thin.
Well, they had been doing movies in color for probably 20 or so years before this. I wonder if this movie would have a different feel. Well, I guess it would if it had been in color. If it would
The
have.
majority of films were still produced in black and white.
Oh yes, but I'm just saying they had clearly it was an option, a technical option to have it filmed in color. It would have been Technicolor. It would have looked like, well, maybe not like Gone with the Wind as far as that Technicolor process, but they could have done color, and obviously opted not to. Personally, I think it would be a less interesting film to look at if it were in color, but I'm personally drawn to the way black and white films were made back in the day. I was actually watching the behind the scenes features for Pleasantville, and they spent some time talking about filming that movie because of course the bulk of it takes place in black and white. And in the case of that movie, they actually shot it in color. They shot it on color film stock. And they talked about if you just drop the color out of it, it doesn't look quite right because you shot it and lit it in color. So certain things are easier to see, yada, yada, yada. And if you just drop it to black and white, it looks a little thin. And I'm going to look at this movie. Look how dark and textured it is. It looks really rich. If they had shot it in color, they would have lit those houses in the background differently. But because it's black and white, they have to have those gradations of the grays and all
black
that.
and white photography is completely different. You know?
Well, yeah. I mean, what I was getting to with that is, even though Pleasantville was made more recently, it doesn't look nearly as good, in my opinion, as this movie. Because back in this time, they knew and had trained themselves how to film in black and white, and they just look beautiful.
Yeah, and I want to stay scene specific, but I got to mention this before I forget. There's a great documentary you've seen as well called Visions of Light.
Oh yeah.
The Art of Cinematography. Very, very well produced, and it's fascinating if you're into that sort of thing. But even if you're not, I'm sure it would make you interested in it.
Right.
If you watched it, it's a 2-hour documentary. I think it was produced by PBS. It's about the development of cinematography, and it all starts off with black and white, and they spend a lot of time dealing with black and white and how cinematographers had to learn how to think, how to see in two colors, in two shades. And it's basically it's a way of seeing filming events that are completely removed from reality by their very design, the fact that there is no color. And I find it truly beautiful in a way. And also saddened by the fact that a lot of people won't watch movies
Mm.
because they're in black and white.
I could be wrong, but have they done a colorized version of this movie?
If they have, I haven't seen it.
I don't think I have, and I just got to say, I don't think it would feel the same.
I don't think so either. I know they tried to do that with Casablanca, and it was pretty much rejected.
Mm. Well, I do have on the Blu-ray the colorized version as well as the black and white of It's a Wonderful Life, and that's one of the very few examples. Although I'd almost always go for the black and white version, that's one of the few examples of two things: of a colorizing process that actually looks really good, and two, how it, I don't want to say enhances the movie, but I do like the color effect on it as well. I actually enjoy it in color as well, as equally as I do the black and white version.
Well, let's get back into the story here. Klaatu, going by the name of Carpenter,
Which he got just from the tag on the on the
has
suit.
just arrived at this, what is it, halfway house? Or
I don't know if you call it a halfway house. Well, I don't know. No, not a halfway house. Just a house where the rooms are rented out.
a very interesting
Which he saw just
use of
walking down the street.
Yes, very interesting use of characters in this sense, and the character played by Patricia Neal is her husband is dead.
Yeah, she's essentially a single
She's a
mother.
single mother, and female characters weren't portrayed like that. Not that I've seen it in
Not
films of this time.
1951. Yeah, that is very rare.
And
Yes.
she actually has a son, and she lives with a group of people. She doesn't live by herself, or she
or live
doesn't-
with her mother or something.
Mhm.
Yeah,
She's an independent woman with a son.
who looks freakishly like Kate Mulgrew and sounds like Kate Mulgrew.
She does a little bit.
It's
But
eerie.
interesting that they employed that.
I agree.
Into the story that
Yeah.
that normally wasn't done back then.
And not only that, did not draw any attention to it. That was not a point of the story. It was never once referenced in that, oh my gosh, you're a single woman, blah, blah, blah.
They're using the device of the newspaper and headlines to propel the story forward, which is good. It's a quick way of
Well, it's
giving us information.
It's morning conversation. It is expository information, but it's actually done in a natural manner where it's just everyone's talking
It doesn't
about
feel
it.
forced.
No, it doesn't. And it doesn't last long either. You get just the information you need, and then they move on. I really like that.
See, everybody's just smoking like chimneys. I love this.
I know. I just like that they, again, this is a way they made movies back then. They just don't dwell. They give you the information you need, and then they move on. They
See, this other woman here, that's kind of, a way that they would portray a woman.
right.
She's obviously a housewife,
Yeah.
or
yeah.
would be if they were, living separately. But the way this other character is portrayed, what is her character's name?
Patricia Neal's
Yes.
Helen.
Yeah, the way Helen is portrayed, just, it baffles me that they, were able to even think to draw a character like that. Very surprising considering it was 1951.
Now,
And that they would use the idea that her husband died in the war, that she's a widow. I find that just fascinating.
Yeah. Now, of course, she's a single mother in the remake. It's a stepson she ends up having, but they spend a fair amount of screen time dealing with that issue and her history with that. And
Can I say something about the remake? I know I said up top that I don't want to be negative, and I don't want to be negative, and I don't want to be a jerk, but I don't like Jaden Smith.
I know you don't.
I'm sorry. I'm sure, his father is a great man, and he makes movies that a lot of people like.
Well, then I think you should it's not that you don't like Jaden Smith. You don't like his acting performances. I'm sure he's a great kid.
I'm sorry, but I'm not an actor. I can't act. And anybody who can look good on screen, who looks good enough to be on screen and can act, then that's great. But I'm sorry, he's not a good actor. And as charismatic as his father is, I don't think he has that same oeuvre. so to speak.
Well, maybe someday he will, but generally I agree with you. He really doesn't.
I'm sorry, Jaden. Nothing personal.
Actually, if you should ever listen to this, young Mr. Smith, I actually enjoyed the remake of Karate Kid, and bravo to you. I think you did a decent job. However, unfortunately, in the remake of this movie, I don't know how much of it was your doing, but the character was greatly flawed. And
yeah, we were just introduced to the dead father through the
see now
cemetery.
this is an important connection or comparison to the remake.
The child here is pretty much adopting him as a surrogate father.
Well, it's not just that. Bobby is the audience. He is looking at he is our eyes. And especially as he starts to learn more about Klaatu, by and large, we're learning that information right along with him. We don't have too much information on Klaatu at this point. And
well, yeah, he's he's giving us background without having scenes,
Exactly. And so, Jaden Smith's character in the remake,
he's going to be ploying. He's going to be trying to get information.
Yeah, no, I get what you're saying. Yeah. But the problem with the remake version, I don't think his name is Bobby, but Jaden's character in the remake, he's unlikable. So the audience has no eyes. And it removes you. A scene like this pulls you in. And you're curious, well, what are those little diamonds? And you're Bobby. I mean, you're asking, or he's asking the same questions you would ask. And he feels like he's every kid, he's you. And he's a good looking kid. I mean, I like him, he's engaging.
Yeah, he's all American.
Exactly. Yeah, sure. Definitely. And, I have seen a lot of the behind the scenes features for this version of the movie, and they have shown the Bobby boy grown up, and it's him. It's the same guy. He's got that same kind of spark. It's kind of nice to see. He's like 60 years old, 70 actually. I like that we're getting a little history lesson too. It's kind of nice. But like you said, this was, kind of at the start of the Cold War era. So this was very pro-American.
This was 1951. So this was 6 years after Hiroshima, Nagasaki, and I believe the Soviet Union had just experimented with their first nuclear bomb. So that was very much on people's minds.
Well, and is, of course, one of the hearts of the movie, as far as the driving plot. I like that as intelligent as Klaatu is, he knows a great deal. His people no doubt know a great deal of Earth and humans and what they do, but he does not know the subtleties, and he's learning those from Bobby. He came to Earth to deliver a message, probably with no real intention of getting to know the people in any personal way. Getting shot derailed that plan. And as a result, this whole thing, the bulk of the movie we're seeing was not part of his agenda. He just came there to deliver a message, and now he's learning about the people by accident. It was just not intended. And there's something interesting to me as a viewer to see a character who's clearly very sophisticated and very intelligent learning and still growing, and not so set in his ways that he thinks he can't be taught anything. And he's perfectly willing to essentially be taught by this boy. I like that. It's almost like Bobby took him under his wing, and there's something very endearing about that.
That's very well said. It kind of reminds me of Starman in a way.
Yeah, yeah.
Although, Starman, Jeff Bridges was invited to Earth, and then he actually got to, then when he encountered Earth and humans, found out that they were quite savage, and he basically learned.
He went there with open arms and found how bad we could be, and Klaatu's kind of getting the reverse.
Yes. Yeah. He learned the world, the customs through Karen Allen, and the way he is learning through Bobby.
Yeah.
But as he slowly learns that a lot of these humans he's encountering have closed minds, especially about the motives of an alien race. And, they're very much influenced by the the pop culture of the time and newspaper headlines and the fear of the time. The fear of annihilation. And he had just asked about, who is the world's greatest thinker? Who can I speak with an open mind? Who will listen to my message? Because no one wants to listen.
Right.
So they're about to go visit Professor Bernhard, who I'm sure was probably a reference to Einstein, I would assume.
In his characterization, do you mean? Or?
He was well known at the time for being still known, but he was still alive. As far as I know, Einstein was still alive when this movie was made.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Well, if the timeline in the movie IQ is right.
Yeah, that's why I didn't want to say anything, but that's what I was actually referring to.
I think he was still alive. I think he died somewhere in the late 50s.
That is really sad.
It's a good movie.
Well, if you'd have to assume their chronology is probably correct. So, yeah, he was probably alive.
Going to be we don't meet Bernhard here, but we see some equations. But this was actually done by John Cleese in the remake, I believe.
Yes.
In a much shorter fashion. And,
it really played differently.
It did not play well in my mind.
It felt like...
It really short-sighted this character.
Well, not only that, but in this version of the movie, the Professor Bernhard character is essential to Klaatu's plans or secondary plans, kind of redo plans to deliver his message to the entire world. In the remake, that Barnhard thing goes completely out the window. And to me, watching the remake...
It is pretty disposable.
In the remake, it is.
Not
it
in
felt
this.
like they threw that scene in there just to acknowledge that they're putting the character in the movie. That whole scene dealing with Barnhard in the remake didn't need to be there at all.
I don't remember too much about that scene, but there was a revelation in it.
Yeah, but it was, like you said,
it was important in
dispensable.
some way, but it was pretty much like, dispensable. It wasn't quite necessary in this. Bernhard plays...
He's crucial.
He is, the only one who will take in the information from Klaatu and actually helps organize the meeting that happens at the end.
Exactly. Without Professor Bernhard, the Klaatu's plans would have been stopped cold. And I just love how simple what Klaatu is doing right now is. That's his message. And that knowing that Bernhard was not there, he solved this, incredibly complex mathematical problem. And that was his calling card. And basically just said, call me. And it wasn't a message saying, hey, I like your work, whatever, give me a call. He does that. How smart is that? What a great...
Well, yeah, he's communicating through, the universal language. He's communicating through mathematics.
He's communicating how intelligent he is and that he is deserving of Bernhard's attention. And, of course, it works.
Mm-hmm. Well, he knows that...
brilliant writing.
With this, through mathematics and demonstrating rational thought, that he'll be able to speak with a rational person, which is exactly what he needs.
And then, of course, when Bernhard calls him over... he's questioning, his answer to this, math question. And, his response is something to the effect of, well, that if I find it works well enough to get me from planet to planet, that's all he needed to say. Great. Got his attention. Great writing. Simple.
Would you like to comment on his name, Carpenter, and the reference to Jesus?
Jesus? Ooh.
Would you like to comment on that? You don't have to.
I think you just did. I don't mind talking about it. I think it's I think it's pretty darn obvious. That's an allegory. Is that the right word?
Yes.
Well, I hadn't even dawned on me until you said it just now. But of course, that's exactly what it is. Carpenter, Jesus was raised by son to, depending on how you look at it, a carpenter, and was sent to Earth to deliver a message and to teach, so to speak. And that's exactly what Carpenter in this movie is doing.
And Klaatu dies as Jesus does.
Mm-hmm.
And is, brought back from the dead.
Is resurrected.
Is resurrected.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a line in this movie, which I'm sure anyone who, worth the salt would be listening to this would know that there's a line that Michael Rennie says somewhere in the third act, something about the Almighty Spirit. That kind of power is reserved for the Almighty Spirit,
Right.
and that was insisted upon being in there by one of the studio heads because they didn't want Klaatu or Gort to have the power of God. They wanted only God to have the power of God.
So they make a point of
Something akin
saying
to
that
that.
although the technology brought him back to life, it's not a permanent thing, and he's going to die.
But they did not. But it was to address that only God has godlike powers.
Well,
something in that regard.
What they're really doing is saying there is a God,
Well, that too, but
which I think was
to
probably
address
the
it,
ultimate point.
these aliens aren't gods. There's
Right.
only this one God.
Right.
We're all good Christians in this world.
Yeah. You're probably not too far off in the motivation of the studios to, put such a reference into the movie. I like how layered it is without drawing any attention to it. That she's living in this, I keep wanting to use the word halfway house. This is not a halfway house, but just a house that the rooms are rented out of, that she's, dating a man and obviously hoping to marry him or hoping that works out. And just all these little layers that are there, but not addressed. They're addressed subtly. They're addressed through action, not through verbal cues.
It's just presented to you. It's
Exactly.
not
It's
explained.
presented. It's not explained.
Yeah, I love, and I know I've already said it, but I just love the fact that she is an independent woman,
Mhm. And she really, even though she's dating this guy, she is not in any way
well, yeah. I mean,
like,
I've seen a lot of
begging for his attention.
exactly. Yeah, right.
Or
I've seen a
just
lot of
sitting there going, "Oh, I hope he'll ask me to marry him." It's not like that.
exactly. I was going to mention, I've seen a lot of older films
Yeah.
recently, and a lot of the women were usually painted in the same way, and that their characters existed solely for the man, and that
And
their
to
only
be
motive
married
was
and-
to be married or
Yeah,
to fall in
yeah.
love, and they had no motivation other than that, and that was their life's goal. And being independent never crossed their mind. They always
Right.
lived under the wing of their husband or the man they loved, and
And
there's
you get
nothing
the
wrong with
feeling
that. But that was the way that female characters were portrayed most of the time in
It
films
was
of
the
this time.
times.
So
But you get the feeling that with the Helen character, even if Klaatu didn't show up, if she did marry Tom, that
see,
she would
look at his hair here. It's very Einstein.
very Einstein-y. But you get the feeling that she would not be secondary to him. When they're sitting in the car and I forget what they're talking, they might even be talking about marriage. I think he brings it up. I think, could be wrong. And she basically tells him, "Hey, wait, we'll see." She's in no rush to jump into something that could be potentially harmful to her son, or her life, or whatever. So she's taking it slow. Like you're saying, it flies in contrast to how women were usually portrayed in this time, and I do like how they do that. But again, it's done through presentation. It's not explained. I like that. I love the Bernhard character. Love it. He's not in any way threatened by Klaatu. He's just so intrigued. And like you said, I want to ask you 1,000 questions.
There's a sense of mystery going on in this movie that the remake didn't really attempt. In the beginning of that film, when Klaatu is being questioned by Kathy Bates, he pretty much mentions right off the top that he's a representative of other worlds, and there's going to be a gathering of leaders, and you're becoming a danger to us, and we have to do something about it. But we don't really know what Klaatu's intentions are in this film.
Not until the very end.
Not until the very end, but he's explaining a little bit about what's going on right
Mhm.
now. But yeah, not till pretty much the end. But his motives. I mean, he has a very pleasant disposition in this film,
Right.
As
Well,
opposed to Keanu Reeves, who seems a little more
Aggressive.
aggressive, yes, but emotionally unavailable. He's not as receptive. He's just kind of cold. Which good or bad, it was just the way they decided to draw that character.
Now, I like this here. Klaatu's getting a little irritated that, he's potentially facing another person who is not going to get these people together the way he wants.
He's like, well, what do I have to do to get you
what's
to
it going
listen
to
to me?
take?
Yeah, you mentioned sinking the Rock of Gibraltar.
Yeah. He's trying to be diplomatic about this, but
he's tried.
He's getting a little irritated.
He's
with
been
these
very
humans
patient
and all of that. But yeah, like you said, he didn't completely explain his motives. He just explained what has brought him here. He has not yet said, and he does not say until the end, what his plans are beyond that. You know that he's here for that reason, but you don't know what he's going to do.
There was the expository scene in the hospital, and he explained that I've come to deliver a message, and with great urgency I need to speak with the representatives of mankind.
Right.
And but he didn't say exactly what for.
Yeah. I mean, he's saying right here, we can destroy you all and all of that, but still he's leaving some things out. He's not really going into detail. This is not his message, not yet. This is this is his motive for being here, but he still has more to say, and this is pretty much all he's going to say, even to Bernhard at this point. Again, we're
so here we're Bernhard is asking for a demonstration that will be
dramatic, but
not destructive.
Destructive.
And I think it was a
great. Klaatu smiling. He's like, yeah, that's a good. Let me think of that. That was pretty smart.
I think it's a brilliant stroke of writing, the use of
shutting off
all the power.
Oh, genius.
And I was very saddened by the fact that they didn't choose to do that in the remake. I think it still would have been quite effective, but the remake, like I said, is sci-fi action, and this isn't.
No, I agree with you. That is a brilliant.
It still would have worked. Why?
Yeah.
Don't fix it if it's not broken.
Well, you would think that it would be more an effective method of demonstrating his power to do it today, given that even more is reliant on technology and power and such things. And they even make the reference in this that hospitals still remained functional, planes in the air still remained functional, but everything else was dead, for that short amount of time. How awesome would that have been? Can you imagine if that happened today? That would be phenomenal. That would be news equal to a spaceship landing. I mean, that's incredible. But yeah, they passed it up. It's amazing.
Well, I think it would have been even more
impactful
by today's standards, because today's society has become so reliant on technology. It was in those days as well, but not as much as today. And how our use of phones and computers, iPhones and iPads, and people can't do anything without their electronic gizmos.
Right.
And if that was just to disappear and be turned off for a day, it would be chaos.
It would be chaos. That's exactly what
even more chaotic than in this film. So I think that the fact that they chose to go another route.
I think he did it for like an hour.
Still, even an hour worldwide.
Can you imagine? Yeah.
Would be chaos. And I think that, like I said, don't fix it if it's not broken. I think that that's a writing stroke that would have worked even better by today's standards.
This character of Tom right now, he is playing a crucial part in the movement of the plot. There's not a lot of characters in this movie. There's Klaatu, Helen, Bobby, Tom, and a couple miscellaneouses here and there, but basically these are the four main characters, and each one of them drives the plot forward. Oh, and Bernhard, five main characters. In the remake, they've taken the Bernhard character and all but tossed him out. They have the character that would have been Tom, the Tom-ish character. He's gone. He's in like the first 10 minutes and he disappears. He plays virtually no role. She's not dating anyone in the new one. I mean, that's fine. She seems to have some sort of history with the man who is the Tom character, or version of the character in the remake. But he's thrown out the window. So basically, the way they built and structured that movie, no one pushes that plot forward the way they do in this one. I find that amazing how any writer sitting down could not see that and removed the characters that were doing that. I just don't understand that. Do you see what I'm saying? Or I don't think I'm nitpicking there.
No, I've heard you nitpick on this subject before, and I'll let you know when you are. You're being very pleasant right now.
Well, it's just frustrating when, like you said, if it's not broke, don't fix it. The character of Tom in this, you don't like him. You're not meant to like him because he basically churns on everybody. But his motivations are clear, they're simple, they're understandable, and his actions change what's happening and make the characters react to it. It's exactly what it should be. He's not extraneous, whereas many of the other characters you run into in the remake that are variations of the characters in this movie do not move the plot forward. And I think that's true for a lot of modern day movies, that they don't seem to understand how that works, how a character needs to push the plot forward. And if they don't, cut them out. But anyway, something about the way this movie was conceived and put together, I'm reminded of the commentary for Dark City, where Ebert talks about it. And I want to say it's probably like, I don't know, the hour and 45-minute mark of the movie, where they're on the boat and being given information by Kiefer Sutherland. And in the commentary, Ebert's talking about how rare it is in a modern day movie. And that was what, 2000?
It was like 99, 98.
Something like that. He was saying how rare it is in a movie of that time to be this far into the movie in Dark City anyway, and still be getting information, still be learning. At that point, in most movies, you'd be into the final action battle, and there's no plot development at that point. This movie is an hour and a half long, and we're 2/3 into it. We're almost the hour mark, and we're still learning. We're still developing. We're still curious and wondering, what is Klaatu doing? If you've never seen this movie before, you have absolutely no idea what he's up to right now. And again, we're the audience. We're Bobby. We are following and learning and discovering. And that's one of the things that I think make this movie so good, because nothing feels expository. It feels like you are really following them along on this adventure right up until the end. Just very well cut, very well written, very well delivered and presented, like you said. And, the remake obviously falls short on that, but I think that's common of many movies made today. They've kind of lost that ability to continue to deliver information that moves the plot forward well into the movie. It's like in most modern day movies, much like the remake of this, you get a lot of expository information within the first 20, 30 minutes if you're lucky. And then it's just action. There is nothing more to learn. You could pretty much cut anything out after that and just get to the end. But not a movie like this. You're still learning.
And I found it kind of interesting that the last commentary we did was a remake of a classic sci-fi film. And our going this time is the original of and then a film that was later remade. I found that kind of interesting. We did a reverse like that.
I hadn't thought about that. And for anyone listening, you want to fill them in on what that was?
Oh, we did the 2002 version of The Time Machine. See, this is one of the things that doesn't really translate very well. The fact that
as far as time,
yeah, the way the public reacts and the government's reaction, the fact that the ship is still out in the open. It's just
they
guarded.
Did build the wall around it.
They did build a wall, but it's being guarded by two guys.
By just two guys. I know, and
anyone
there's
no
walk
crowd.
up to it.
Yeah, anybody can just walk up to it.
Yeah, there would be a crowd around this 24/7.
But I like this technique of the light. Very simple.
Simple. It is so simple.
It's never addressed in dialogue. It's obviously he's signaling him.
He's signaling him like in a form of Morse code or something. Mm-hmm. And this is the first time since he came out of the ship that Gort's moving which as the viewer, you're just thinking, oh, wow, what is this? What's going on? You're intrigued. And yeah, it's simple.
Well, I have a fascination with Gort because, like I said, I grew up with this film, so I have
Sure.
a amount of respect for it. He is a classic movie robot.
Mhm.
But anybody's outlook. If you take someone, say, around in their teenage years from today, and you show them this film, honestly, I don't think they're going to like it unless they're a film aficionado. But they look at this, they're going to see, a man in a suit, and clearly, that's what he is. But
he's still
they're not
a
going
big
to have
man
that
in a suit.
Oh,
though.
of course, they're not going to have that kind of, love or that I have. They're just going to see a cheesy man in a suit effect.
Well,
Because they're used to CG effects.
yeah, I
They're used-
unfortunately, I think by and large you're probably correct. That's
Yeah.
very sad. What Gort does have going for him as far as like a timeless element is that that is a really big guy in there, and he is moving. You can see the zipper down the back of that.
Mm-hmm.
But in those bigger shots like that, it kind of looks like he's wearing underwear and all that. That's just a little cheesy if you want to examine it. But the close-ups where it's just of his face and the visor lifting up, I still think that's awesome and holds up.
Talking about the way generations view older films, I did have an encounter with somebody. I've spoken to you about this briefly once before. This was around the time the remake was coming out, and I was talking with this, he was, probably about 10 years younger than I was, and obviously very influenced by, very modern films. Not that there was a problem with that, but that was where he was getting most of his love of film for. It wasn't for older style films, and I was commenting on the original, and I'd hope that they would make a respectful version. And he was commenting that he did recently watch this version for the first time, and he didn't like it. He thought that it was cheesy and the effects were bad, and Gort was obviously a man in a suit. So I don't know if the film really, translates.
That's
to,
a shame. I like what he's doing right
modern
here,
minds.
that he waves his hands
Which
over
is really
them.
sad. Oh yeah,
and
that's
gets them to-
that's good technique.
Yeah,
Well,
I like that.
This is very classic, interior, it's flying saucer interior design.
Right. I like the words he's using in his foreign tongue. I like that. It's got a nice sound to it. I like the little angst that little Bobby here is put through here. He's very confused. And, he really likes Mr. Carpenter as we do as the audience. And now he's kind of he's put in a situation that he's really not emotionally equipped to deal with. And,
I know why Bobby exists in this story, but I'm not sure why Jaden Smith's character exists in the other story, because
he doesn't. That's what I'm saying.
He doesn't do much other than, from what I remember, I've only seen the remake once, but he doesn't seem to do much other than give the character played by, of course, I'm drawing a complete blank.
Keanu Reeves?
No.
Oh, the Helen character?
Yeah. All he does is give her a hard time.
Yeah.
And you really develop a sense of hatred for that character. At least I did anyway, because he's nothing but
He's basically just along
full
for the
of
ride.
contempt for the mother, for
Right.
his stepmother. And he isn't used to get information out of Klaatu as Bobby is.
No, he's not.
in this film.
That's what I was saying.
But yeah,
contrast.
he's kind of along for the ride, like you said.
That's exactly what he is. He does not further the plot in any way. There was no reason to have him there other than that this movie had the boy, so they had a boy. That's it. Really the way that movie was made, all they needed was the Helen character, and that's it. I don't recall. Did they do anything with money in the remake?
I don't believe so.
I don't think so either. Again, nice little touch. It's all connected. They wasted no time. You might have thought if you were watching this for the first time that scene with Bobby and Klaatu at the cemetery and the diamonds was extraneous information. No, not in a movie like this. they pull it back together. Every minute of screen time was important.
Well, yeah, it was a thread, and they're pulling the thread.
Well, yeah.
But,
if you look at the runtime of a lot of movies made in this, they're usually pretty short. They're about 90 minutes, maybe even a little less, because they didn't have any
well, it was a good way of
information.
It was a good way of demonstrating that their system of economics was different, but it actually came back and actually meant
exactly.
something.
It did two things, like you said. Yeah, it explained their culture, a little bit of how they've evolved and developed, but it's also part of the plot. But it doesn't feel like it.
Jake Sisko said, I'm human. We don't have any money.
We don't have any money. But obviously, I mean, if you want to be analytical of it, is in as far as the scene where, he presents those to Bobby, clearly their society is not, terribly unlike ours. They obviously have some form of currency, so if you're watching it trying to figure out what their culture's like, that's telling you something. So it's all useful information. Look at him, man. He's got presence. I just love that guy. And of course, right now we're just a minute or two away here from Klaatu's explanation or demonstration, that is, of shutting off the power. This is, we talked about this. It's very sad that they did not do this in the remake, but we can't change it. I think I've fawned over the writing of this enough. Obviously, this was just a stroke of brilliance. You didn't need to do anything. It was not about sci-fi spectacle. It was about brains over brawn. And I think that is ultimately one of the main factors that makes this a classic, because it's not about spectacle. If this movie had been about big, monsters or whatever, it would never have become the classic that it is. But it's a cerebral movie. It's a thinking man's sci-fi movie. And that's why it has stood the test of time and is not just considered, by myself, but considered by many one of, if not the greatest sci-fi movies of all time. Also, I think, especially given when this was made, 1951, if you think about this, a lot of sci-fi movies or horror movies or even fantasy movies, if you want to lump them into that, usually the alien is the bad guy or the monster is a bad guy, and it's all about the townspeople killing him off somehow. It's just some mindless creature. But this didn't do that. This took a different path. Now, literary works, of course, did things differently. They presented alien cultures that were far more advanced and benevolent and whatnot. But on film, at this point in time, that was kind of a rare and different thing, and way ahead of its time. I really think it's sad that a movie like this has gone unseen to the modern generations because of the black and white nature of it. Its theme is really timeless, because human beings are exactly what he describes them to be at the end of the movie. We're the same way we were then, we are now, we will be for quite some time after. And Klaatu is from a race of people that we would like to see ourselves grow into. Timeless. Just brilliant. And I guess I'll tag this one more time. Talking about the writing, I just love how simple this story is. It is, you referenced Starman, and that this movie is kind of similar in that, and it is. Starman is a very similar thing. It's got a little bit of sci-fi in the beginning, but basically Starman is a road movie. And although Klaatu is not traveling anywhere, basically he gets there and he's got to go through some stuff. He doesn't have to go from point A to point B like Starman does, but he has to solve a problem. And in this case, his problem is he has to arrange for this meeting that he thought would just be kind of delivered to him when he got there. But that's it. And then you get to the end and you get the meeting. That's it. It's very simple, but I dare say it's deceptively simple, because there's so much going on here. There's so many layers, but we're talking about 5 main characters here. And every single one of them, like I said, drives the plot. And the movie is tight. We're probably winding down the second act at this point. And the second act of this movie, you and I talked about before, is a little slower than the first and the third act, but it's still completely engaging. I'm never bored. To say it's slower than the first and third act doesn't mean it's slow. It's just slower than those two acts, because you've got the introduction and, of course, the more chasey type finale of the third act. But we're an hour and 5 minutes into the movie, plot still keeping you utterly engaged, because here we are with Tom. He's on a mission now, and his mission just started 5 minutes ago. And now he's working to undo or figure out whatever Klaatu, although he knows him as Carpenter, is up to. And as the viewer, you're trying to figure out, well, what wrench is he going to throw into the works? How's he going to screw this up? And you know that the conference is slowly coming together. You know that Helen has just been told and believes Carpenter is Klaatu. Things are coming together. Things are gelling, but we're not even really close to the finale yet. And we're still learning. We're still engaged by the actions happening to the characters, because again, we are learning this as it goes.
Some of the photography in this is really quite striking. You just don't see this in modern films. I mean, it's because it's in black and white as well, but the way the lighting was,
Right.
The lighting across their faces and the wire mesh across their faces kind of makes me feel a little noirish. I like that. It's very nice.
I like, it was a couple minutes ago, how, and that's really all the lip service that's paid to it, is when Barnhart's secretary is freaking out over this, power outage, this freak power outage thing that's obviously not just a power outage. Obviously something intentional has been done, and she knows it was Klaatu. She knows the alien did it, and Barnhart's looking at her and question. I love how he's doing that. Are you scared? Oh yes, I'm terrified, blah blah blah. And how he's just marveling at how genius Klaatu's choice to do that was. He's just thinking, man, that man was good. That was very smart. I love that. I love the characterization of the Barnhart, personality, that he would react in such a way. I think that was great. Almost funny in a good way. Now, of course, these military guys are very cliche, very...
Oh, I was about to say the same thing. They're all crusty old white men sitting around tables smoking.
Yes, and it's, we will get him. We will do it, and we will win. We will be victorious. Very, very Americana, very we will win. We're so great, and all of that. Now, they just introduced the idea that they're going to, or that they have encased the Gort robot in that plastic material that they believe will keep him completely immobile, because they can't move him. They can't cut into him. They figured that out. So they figured they might as well contain him, since they know. Did they figure out that he moved? Oh, yeah, he did, because he knocked out the guards. So they know that he moved. They know he's potentially even more of a threat than he was just standing there, guarding the ship. They know that he's capable and can do things. So they're trying to contain him. And I of course, I bring that up because in a few minutes he's going to get right on out of that. I think that's a nice little touch. Nice effect. Simple, but nice.
Well, would you like to comment on the remake of Gort and how he was used a little bit differently?
He was used very differently. I do think the way the government in the remake dealt with Gort is more realistic, in that they try and move him to a location where they feel they can deal with him and experiment on whatever.
Yeah, they have him in some kind of underground research facility.
Bunker, yeah. Now, the remake has Gort like 20 feet tall or 30 feet tall. So he's huge.
He's huge. I think he's a bit larger than that.
That, to me, was kind of a shame because clearly, as this movie shows, Gort does not need to be 20 or 30 feet tall. He
was kind of like Godzilla-sized almost.
Yeah, and it's almost comical. In my opinion, it was just unnecessary. Now, yes, in this, he is obviously a guy in a suit.
Well, what I would have liked was an actual tangible robot. And no, I'm not talking about if he was CG and he was 7 feet tall. I mean, a physical object, and I knew that was really there in front of the camera. That I would have very much appreciated.
Well, I would have much rather to have been a physical thing. However, I'll disagree with you a little bit. I do think that they could have done like you said, maybe a 7 foot tall Gort in CG. But if they were going to do that, then have it be the basic form that Gort is, 2 arms and 2 legs and everything, but make him, say, way thinner than a human could be. So it's not a person, but keep him at a respectable size, because the beauty with Gort, although he is, like 7-8 feet tall, he's still a human size, and yet he is incredibly powerful and capable of such destruction. It's almost shocking, that he's capable of these things in such a compact size, that he has that laser and all that. When you have him be 20, 30 feet tall, you expect such power and destruction from him. It's to me, it's not as visually interesting. Now, of course, they had him disintegrate and become like locusts.
Locusts, the way you referred to it.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know what to say about that. Why?
Well, that was another, writing element that was differing from this version, and that's Klaatu was there to save the Earth, not humanity.
Mm-hmm.
Because he felt that.
Well, I mean, I know what Gort was doing in the remake. That his reasoning, the writing reasoning behind that was that he would disintegrate into those locusts and he would just destroy everything he came in contact with. I get that.
Well, destroy every man-made object.
Well, yes. I'm sorry. That's what I mean. I mean, it's not that I don't understand what he was doing
for other cultures.
Sure. I just think that why would you take away this visual representation of this powerful creature? Gort in this obviously does not change form. He just walks around with that laser, and if he wants to destroy it, he destroys it. Pretty simple. That's all he needs to be. He did not need to disintegrate into locusts. It was, I think, something they chose to do just to add more spectacle. I don't think it was necessary. I personally would have found it much more interesting if, assuming I had no control over the changing of the story itself, the scene in the remake where he does disintegrate and starts going down his path, basically, I would have found it much more interesting if a 7 foot tall, too slender to be a human being robot, not with 8 legs, 2 arms, 2 legs, basically the Terminator, let's say, was walking down the street, pinpointing things with his, laser, his single laser, and just walking down the street, taking out everything as he goes. Very simple, very direct, and very scary. It does not need to be so visually complex to be interesting. I think that's something that is lost.
Oh, I agree with you. I love the way I found it admirable, the way the military is portrayed negatively in this film. They're the villains, and this is not like pro-America, go America.
Which is ironic given the time that it was made.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. Mm-hmm. Ironically, yes, considering the time it was made, that the the 50s were looked upon as, the happiest time in America.
It's not that they're mustache twirling villains. They're just uninformed.
But they're,
Well,
They're not the good guys.
No, well, they're not the good guys from Klaatu's perspective. However, they're not exactly the bad guys.
Well, they're not the protagonists. That's for sure.
No, they're not.
So-
But I don't think they qualify as the antagonist either. Not in this case. These guys are just doing their job. I mean, they don't know Klaatu. They don't know what he's up to. They're doing.
Well, they're not. Yeah, they're
what
not.
they should do.
They're not driven by any evil motive. They're driven by fear.
Well,
But still, their actions are negative.
I think I understand what you're saying. I'm not disagreeing with you. I just think, to be fair, they're doing exactly what they should be doing because they don't know Klaatu. You know, if you had to label anyone as the antagonist in this movie, Tom is obviously the antagonist, you know, because he actively tries to get Klaatu caught, but also in some
But his
way.
intentions aren't. You know, he's doing it out of care for Helen.
Well,
He's worried about
partly.
her.
I think he's just an ass. He's like,
Well,
well, if I can't have her, fuck you. You're not going to
could
get
be.
her. You know, he's kind of a dick.
Klaatu Barada Nikto
There you go. 3 famous words have been
often been used in pop culture.
that most people don't even know. That's the sad thing.
Where it comes from.
Yeah, they may know the words, but they have no idea where it comes from.
Listen,
But
it's
that
Ash
is,
that
but, you know, I'm
couldn't
glad you
remember.
brought that up because in the remake, I feel the government is portrayed as the villain, whereas
Oh,
in this,
Very much so. Yeah,
but-
like you said, in this, they're just more misinformed.
or not informed at all because they don't
Mhm.
know. They don't know who Klaatu is. They don't know what he's up to. They have every reason to track him down. You know that they just wouldn't listen in the beginning, so he had to do things his own way. But yeah, in the remake, they're assholes. That's a real shame. That's a cliche, and I don't think they're necessarily portrayed as a cliche. And some of their personalities are, but not the government as a whole. I do like this little phone tag game they're playing to catch him. It's very, necessary because of the times and technology they had. They actually did something very similar in a movie called White Heat, a gangster movie from 30s or 40s or so. They basically did something kind of like this, only they were tailing a bad guy. They were following him, and they didn't want him to know that they were following him. So every couple blocks, they had cop cars stationed, undercover cop cars stationed all over the city, and they had their radios, and they'd say, "Okay, I'm approaching, 5th and Lexington. I'm going to take off. You take over," and they kept tabs on him, following the bad guy for miles and miles, and the bad guy had no idea because the cars kept changing. I just thought that was nice, and of course the military is doing that this way. I like that. And I like that Klaatu, got shot and died here. It's interesting. Certainly, again, as the viewer, you're about 15 minutes from the end of the movie, and he's been killed. And
Yeah, the main character just died. And
Yeah, as the
wondering
viewer,
where this story is going to go.
exactly. You're thinking, what on earth could happen next? No guards
Nobody
at all.
there.
and yet they're allowed to hold a meeting here. It's fast. This is definitely something that should have been updated if the movie had been remade properly.
Now, I wanted to get your opinion on this scene right here. The fact that this is the only time that Gord actually kills. He kills these 2 guards.
Yeah, but it's not the only time. I'm sure that people had to have died in the beginning.
He didn't kill anyone in the beginning.
How do you know there was no people in those tanks? There had to have been people in those
come
tanks.
on. He just destroyed the technology.
Dude, they're not going to... What's the point of bringing a tank if you've got no one inside of it to shoot it? There was a gunner in there at least.
I don't think so. That's not the way I've seen it throughout the years. I've always felt that he just, he took the guns, he zapped the guns in their hands, and then he took away their elements, their means of technology. And here you see him actually kill 2 people.
I don't object with the possibility that there was no one in there, but I think you could choose to also believe that there were people in those, tanks in the beginning. But I see what you're saying. This is at least the first time you've seen a human just flat out killed, visually. And it is. You realize Gort means business. Although what I don't know here, and they never actually explain, is how does Gort know what just happened to Klaatu? How does he? The only reason he's acting, he's going right now to go get Klaatu's body. How does he know that Klaatu just got shot and killed? I would have liked some sort of explanation for that. Anything, just a throwaway line, just something to tell me.
Well, he isn't motivated at the moment to do anything. He's just getting out of his box that they encased him in.
Oh, you're right.
It's when she delivers the line, Klaatu Barada.
Yeah, that's his. I stand corrected. You're absolutely right. He is just getting out of his shell. Although, why?
See, if she hadn't come up, he just would have kept standing there.
He would have probably gone back into the ship or something. Or yeah, just stood there. I guess you're right. See, now this is what most movies would be like: the screaming woman, the monster coming from this time. But no, yes, that looks a little hokey, and the man in the suit and all that. But
you're about to see some string effects that I don't know if have been eliminated from this Blu-ray or not.
Probably not.
When I rewatched this,
that eye is scary.
Yeah,
look at that. In those close-ups like that, he looks really good.
Oh yeah. Well, it's just such an iconic image. The visor raising up over his face.
This is brilliant.
I mean, they used that on the poster when the remake was coming out.
Now, she did resort to a little bit of the classic 50s woman there, but she sucked it up real quick. She did her job. She stayed strong. Yes, as you were saying, the wire work. Lock Martin, the guy that actually played... Oh, there's those strings.
It's very visible.
Very visible in this Blu-ray.
Quite surprised that they didn't clean that up and take that out.
Lock Martin had a very bad back. He was not a strong man. He was just a tall man, and he could not carry Patricia Neal, so they had to have her on wires.
Kind of reminds me of Andre the Giant, Princess Bride.
Yeah, very similar.
Big guy, but had back problems because he was so big.
He was so big,
and he couldn't hold Robin Wright. He couldn't hold her.
Yeah,
I think they had her on supports as well.
They did.
Yeah,
they did. Now, of course, it's convenient timing that he happened to come out of that shell right when she came up. But you're right.
Sure.
I really wish I hadn't said that because you're right. He was just getting out of that shell. That's just the moment he chose to do it. I love the flashing light on him.
Yeah, that's good.
I love that.
That's how he's. I hate it when people do that during commentaries. Just mention, "Oh, I love that," but it's hard not to because it is so striking to the eye.
It is. It's striking. It is. I mean, it's just the light on his face, but it's intriguing.
I mean, it was the composition of that shot as well was very nice. How would you say Gort compares to other robots of the time?
Well, of the time,
or just robots that have become iconic.
Iconic. Well, there's Robbie the robot.
C-3PO
of the time.
Well, I mean, he's become iconic now.
Well, see, I don't really think of C-3PO as a robot. I think of more as him almost like an android because he's very human. Gort is not human at all. Robbie the robot is not human at all. He has a human voice and all that. Obviously, his body's not really human. But C-3PO is so anthropomorphized that you think of him more as a person. He's an android like Data, less so than a robot like. There's Twiki.
I was about to mention Buck Rogers.
Yeah, Twiki I think falls in line with this. Twiki, I think, is actually not unlike Gort in his simplicity. The C-3PO is the same thing. How you don't need to be a visual, marvel, so to speak, to convey complex technology or anything like that. Gort is fantastically effective with doing nothing. In fact, that's what makes Gort so interesting because
the mystery behind him.
And he acts very deliberately, and he lumbers. He goes very slow, but that doesn't make him any less threatening because he'll just keep going until he gets what he wants.
Yeah, and I found it interesting that you pick up that Gort is protector. He's a guard of sorts.
Yeah,
but his real reason for existence is that they were created. This robot race, Gort being one of them, was created
to act as a police force on the universe.
Yes, and that this alien race that Klaatu is a part of was afflicted by the same kind of anger and fear nature that humans are, and that they created robot race to help police themselves.
Well, yeah, I mean, he of course explains that in his final speech that he's really saying that he's not trying to say that he's in any way better than humans. He's in fact saying that he's almost exactly like them, and that his people are, and that their
he's
solution,
just saying that you need to grow up as we have.
Yeah, and he's like, this is what we did. We created this race of robots to police ourselves, and we gave them absolute power over us.
Yeah, it's a comment on human nature.
Yeah,
sure.
and he's saying we're just like you. It's in our blood, and since we clearly have no self-control to stop it, we're going to put the police power into these robots that seek out and identify any hostility, any violence, and remove the aggressor. And he makes a very, pointed statement that you don't want to be on the opposite end of their judgment, because their judgment is swift and it's severe.
Kind of like Judge Dredd.
Yeah, he does not want to know that they don't, he tells you that the Gort robots police force don't ask questions. They simply see the violence, and as best they can determine it, eliminate the aggressor. That's it. No questions, no judging in the sense of a trial. There's no trial. They see it and they stop it. And as Klaatu further explains, you be good as a result. It gives you no choice but to be civil. Brilliant. And he's saying, we're not saying our system's perfect, but it works. And you guys should probably do something similar.
I wonder if the makers of Stargate were influenced by this kind of, resurrecting device.
What do they call it? Sarcophagus?
Mm. Well, it reminded me of it in this particular moment. I hadn't thought of it in that way before, but...
Here we're coming up on your God reference. Or the Lord Almighty, that sort of thing.
Almighty Spirit.
Yeah. She's pretty.
Well, yes.
In a, different kind of way, though.
Well, she's attractive without being a great beauty. She's very modest in her beauty.
That's good with modest. I like that.
She photographs very well, but she doesn't overwhelm you.
I seem to recall I saw an interview with her not too long before she passed away, where she talked about this movie briefly, and how when making it, she certainly never expected it to become the classic that it is. Most sci-fi movies of the time were kind of schlock and B movies and whatnot, and this clearly became something else. I don't know, honestly. I wish I knew. I don't know how it was actually received and or perceived at the time it was released, but obviously it's become a classic.
Well, yeah, when I think of sci-fi movies from the 50s, and me being such a fan of Mystery Science Theater 3000, I've seen a lot of cheesy sci-fi movies,
right.
And a lot of them were like that, it seems, So having a movie like this would have been a shock. And so I'm not surprised at all that it was well received, and still is well received today. So finally, he gets to deliver his message here. So yeah. By the way, this is why I'm here. This is what I meant to tell you a couple of days ago.
Yeah, I mean, he's got his suit on. He's ready to go. As soon as he says his piece, he's out of there. And of course, here we are with this extremely timeless message of...
I like this is good. All the different ethnicities that are being shown here. This is good. This is nice. It's not just all white folk.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah.
So it's a very good touch.
See, he's saying, you guys did what we did. You hired policemen. You created a system, but you still haven't got it yet. and you need to get a hold of yourselves before you bring that poison out into the universe.
Well, yeah, he's commenting on their technology rapidly advancing. He mentions atomic power.
Yeah.
And, this is before Sputnik. So, we'd been dreaming of space, but we hadn't been to space yet or sent anything to space.
Mm-hmm.
But we had dreams of it, and we knew that we would achieve that sometime. Maybe not around the time we did, but that it was a possibility and would become a reality. Not using atomic power, though, that turned out to be,
Well, yeah.
But
What a great speech.
mm-hmm.
Just good. Wonder how many drafts they had to get through to get to this, perfect wording. Not one word seems unnecessary. See, I like that. Again, like you're saying, they're not pretending to be perfect. But if you're going to join us in our interstellar community, we really need you to pull it together. And if you don't, he's not subtle about his threat, we'll reduce you to a burned out cinder. Very nice. That got their attention.
I like this. This composition is with Gort in the background and him out of focus and him in the forefront. That's what he's talking about. It's the fact that, Gort is a police force of sorts.
Mm-hmm.
He's looking very ominous.
What a great last
just standing there.
Great last line. The decision rests with you. Just great. Great Bernard Herrmann music kicking in.
Yeah, the choice is yours, as it always was.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just here to let you know that your actions
have greater consequences.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and like
I mean, basically, a child becoming a man, you learn that your actions have consequences and that you can't get away with anything all your life. You're eventually going to have to.
Look at that.
Yeah,
look.
That was a great delivery.
Tells you everything you need to know. But yeah, I like what you were saying about the composition of having Gort in the background. I would say the word restraint comes to mind in as far as their usage of Gort. They could have made him stand right next to Gort. Didn't need to. No, he stood in front of him, so Gort was in the background. Restraint. Nice choice. A lot of subtlety. It's something about that shot just made me think of Hot Shots. They're like, I'm landing now. Could you guys get out of the way?
Yeah.
I don't care if it's just a simple disc. It's kind of a nice looking ship. Classic. Well, this pretty much buttons it up. They really don't do credits the same way anymore. So, any final thoughts?
No, I had a tremendous amount of respect for it as a young kid, and I still do today. And I wish that people will, younger people will give this movie a chance as opposed to the remake.
I agree with you. I couldn't say it any better. So that being the case, the movie just buttoned up. This is Justin, and I'm here with Josh. We thank you for listening. And if we're lucky, someday we'll sit down and do a commentary for the real remake and updating of The Day the Earth Stood Still. So again, thank you for listening. Talk to you next time.
Good night.